Hi, I'm Willie. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. And what we're going to look at in this video is another industrial Ethernet switch that was sent to me by InHand Networks. Now, this is the ISM5012D. We'll bring up the spec sheet here in a little bit. But you can see we've got 8 gigabit ports there. We've got 4 SFP ports. Nice little warning sticker that's a laser. Don't stare into the lasers. On top, we've got a command line port. We've got a power pass through. We've got a relay port. We have the actual power for the switch. On the back, we've got our mount for our DIN rail. And this entire switch it's metal. So we're going to fire it up. I appreciate InHand sending this over for us. Let's take a look at the spec sheet real quick. And I'm actually going to run this one here in the lab and pass devices through it and see what the heck is going on with it before I give you a final opinion about it. So it is, excuse me, an industrial grade managed Ethernet switch. It is FCC certified. Has 4 SFP ports, 8 gigabit ports, can operate from negative 40 degrees to plus 85 degrees Celsius, which is negative 40 to 185 degrees freedom units or Fahrenheit. Does support qwest, all kinds of stuff. Let's scroll down. Let's take a look at the specs here. See if we can take a look at everything here. So all of their switches do have console ports, which is nice. Be able to console into that. It is IP40 rated. It's IP30 if it is the PoE model. Weighs 1 kilogram. There is no fan, right? Because the whole thing is basically a heatsink. It's 24 volt DC in. And let's see, it consumes less than 15 watts. We already went over the operating temperature, and the humidity that you can run this in is 5 to 95%. Now, one thing that I don't know that I'm going to dig into, that this is prompting me to dig into, is what all of these standards for the power protection is. So I'm going to dig into those. If you know what those are already, and you don't have to Google it, let us know down in the comments. And then there's also some vibration resistance ratings, fall ratings, and things like that. It does come with a 5-year warranty, and the manufacturer claims that the mean time between failures, so when can you expect this to fail? They say 35 years, right? So it's not that they've had this model running for 35 years. There's some calculations that go into that. All right, so this has a total switching bandwidth of 56 gigabits per second with a forwarding rate of 1.488 million packets per second. It can handle up to 8,000 MAC addresses. So it does support spanning tree, rapid spanning tree, VLANs, queuing, priority queuing, 802.1x. And it does support LACP. So we'll take a look at the interface on this thing. It does support multicast, port mirroring. Looks like it has broadcast storm suppression. Supports PTP for time. Does VLANs and GVRP. Does have port isolation. Does have QoS. I'm assuming this means 8 different queues. Supports a 9,000 or a 9K or a 9,000 bit jumbo frame. Does support the Ring network protocol, which a lot of the industrial switches support that. We mentioned before that it supports LAGs or LACP. You can manage it through the command line. Excuse me. You can manage it through a web browser, the console port, all those good things. You can authenticate your admin users against Radius, which is kind of nice. Supports SNMP 1, 2, and 3. Supports Armon. That's fantastic. Supports LLDP. It does have an alarm relay output. It's got some LEDs on it. And what else? You can import and export backups. It supports log retention locally and remote log server. That's fantastic. And it has a local or remote firmware upgrade option. So now what we're going to do is I am going to unhook the Teltonica that's back there. I'm going to get this all wired in. We're going to get it plugged into the network. And yeah, we're going to explore the interface. So we'll be right back. Let me real quick. So the default username on this is ADM, and the default password is 123456. I'm probably going to forget that because it's not that it's not basic, but it's a little different than everything else. But so I'll probably just jot this down. But let me get this hooked up, and we will be right back. All right, so I've got that little big beefy switch plugged in, the InHand switch, and the default IP address on it is 192.168.2.1. It did not grab a DHCP address, so I had to change the IP on my computer, and then I was able to get to it. And by default, it looks like everything is in non-English, so I'm going to click the English button over here. All right, that looks a little better. So we're going to, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Global Network Config, and we're going to say DHCP, and we're going to hit Save All. And so this should get an IP address then on my 192.168.66 network. So I'm going to pause this video, change my PC config back, find the switch, and then we will take a look. I'll be right back. All right, so I changed that global network config to DHCP and saved it, but it didn't. It just said configuration change. So then I rebooted it, and it didn't change the IP. So if you're running InHand networks, tell me what I'm doing wrong as far as that goes. It keeps going back to local with the 192.168.2.1, which is totally fine. So let's just take a look at the interface here. Now I am going to use it just as a switch, as a pass-through switch, and see how it performs. I'm going to have spanning tree on it, so I'll have to make sure that's in line with the rest of my switches. I'm not 100% sure how that's going to work out, but maybe we need a new version of the software. So we're running 2.0.2, and I don't know if they have, let's see here. There's a download, there's a user guide, and I should probably read the user guide. So I'm going to see if I can find some firmware for this real quick and make sure we're on the right version. Stand by. So on the download center, I did not find a new version of the firmware. The only thing they had for the industrial switches was a data sheet. So InHand, if you're watching this, please reach out. Let me know if there's a new firmware coming or what, because I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. I probably need to read through the guide, because the first time I fired this up is the first time you are all seeing this, right? I didn't do a fancy unboxing, but we're plugging it in for the first time. It powered on, which is fantastic, and I can get into it and I can change the language to English, which is absolutely fantastic. I just don't know if I'm on the latest firmware. So anyway, so if we go to basic settings, we have all of our system information. I'm assuming that the name, location, and contact can be pulled through SNMP, along with a lot of the other things on the switch, such as power supply status, memory usage, and temperature. That global network config is where we can change our IP address or change it to DHCP. Got static ARP. We don't have anything configured in here. So our port configuration, we can disable it. We can change the speed, the duplex, the flow control. We can also add a description. Let's see if a description for a port. So you can't see it, because my face is over it. And I just noticed it. So here we are going through this live together. So I made that switch. I made the change to the switch. And down in the bottom right hand corner, there's a set configuration take effect. And if I click that, I would bet that this IP address would change to DHCP. Let's see if I'm right about that. So we'll see what happens. Let me give this a second and I'll see if it gets a new IP. Stand by. And sure enough, when you see all the buttons, things work. So it did grab it grabbed a DHCP IP. It is now on the 66.108 network. So that was my bad. So like I said, we're going through this together. I'm familiarizing myself with this. You're seeing it the first time that I'm seeing it. So I'm glad that I noticed that button. You weren't able to see it because of my face covering it. So I'm betting that this will all work. So software here, I don't have, like I said, I don't have a new version of the firmware. So InHand, if you are watching this, please let me know if there's a new firmware and where I can download it, because I did not find it on the download center. Here's a load, import, export of your current config. We can restart the switch here. We can clear the MAC address table, ARP table. If you've ever dealt with networks and networking for any amount of time, you know that things are supposed to time out. But a lot of times we go in and we clear the ARP and we clear the MAC address table to make things happen in a more timely fashion. Here we can factory reset it. Under security, we've got user management. We've got group management here, and we can create groups. Once again, you can't see it, but there is a create button down at the bottom. You can't see it because my face is over it. So we could create a new user here. We can create new groups, manage the passwords here. There's some author management. So these are going to be different levels. I'm assuming when users make configuration changes, I would assume that maybe it shows up here. I can't guarantee that. We've got management access, so we can do HTTP, which we're doing here, but we can also enable HTTPS. SSH is also disabled by default, and here is the SNMP basic configuration with the SNMP 1 and version 2 configuration here, and the SNMP version 3 configuration here. Here's our command line login, so we can put some banner text there, and the timeout is 300 seconds or 5 minutes. Port security. We've got static MAC filter mode here. So if we look at the detail, we can see the MAC addresses in there, and then here's the dynamic MAC. So if we enable that port security, and we can say that there can only be one MAC address, the first MAC address is going to get stuck in there, and if it sees another MAC address on that port, it's going to error disable the port. Over here, we've got 802.1x port authentication, so all of our 802.1x stuff here, and it looks like there's a guest VLAN, vendor permission, re-authentication. Here's our authentication type. This is pretty cool. I'm going to have to mess with this. This would be people who are authenticated. Here's our port configuration, so we can select the authentication type, authentication mode, single host, multiple authenticate, and then we can put a guest VLAN on here. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty straightforward too. Here's our port statistics, and then here is our radius setup. So we can add a, we can create our radius setup, so we could point this to any radius server that we want to authenticate users against. And so when we do it this way, we can also enable MFA for our admin users on our switches. We've got our time settings. So basic time here, we can set this to, let's see, looks like it's just Central America there. Can set that. System clock configured. But I also don't think I have, NTP set, so we could do ntp.uiuc.edu and then time.nist.gov and then time.google.com. And we'll set those. Oh, it wants IP addresses, not fully qualified domain names. So I'm going to uncheck that for now. We're just going to scroll past that. And then here's the PTP configuration, if you need that instead of NTP. Network security, we can do DHCP snooping here, which is fantastic. Here's our VLAN config for DHCP snooping, the interface config, and then if we had any bindings, we would see those there. Under network security, we do have access control list. So here is here's an IP version 4, and it wants to know if it's standard or extended. We can do MAC access control, and then we can assign the access control list to the ports. We've got filtering down here, so we can filter out, let's see, filter global configuration, ARP, BPDU, ERPS, DHCP. So we can turn those filters on per port. All right, switching. We've got storm control, so we can do broadcast, multicast, or unicast storm suppression here. We can do port rate limiting, so we can enable that and disable it, and we can set the speed, the send and receive speed per port. Here's our MAC address table. Here's the aging configuration, so we can actually make that MAC address age out faster than 5 minutes. Here is the multicast setup. So we can have this thing basically be a repeater. Here's our VLAN setup. So we can create a new VLAN, give it a name, and then assign it to a port. We can do batch VLAN configuration, and then we can come in here and change the PVID on the port and all those good things, and what VLANs are allowed and what VLAN is untagged on the port. Pretty straightforward there. Here we've got our GMRP. We don't have anything assigned to those VLANs. Port configuration, multicast list, and then VLAN interface. So I don't know if we create a VLAN. Let's create a VLAN. We're just call it 2 and test. And let's come down here to VLAN interface. And if we created a VLAN interface, looks like we can possibly, the primary IP must be configured for the VLAN interface before the secondary is configured. It looks like we might be able to assign let's see what happens here. Let's set that. Yep. And so it looks like we can do, we can assign IP addresses. So we can do not only just our standard regular VLANs, but it looks like we can actually do maybe some light layer 2 stuff, maybe some static routing with this switch. Here's our qwest setup. We can set our values, and you can see that there are 8. That's what we were talking about earlier. There's our queues and our QIDs. Redundancy. So here we can do link aggregation, backup link configuration. These are things I'm going to have to really dive into. Here's our spanning tree setup. And you can see by default, the spanning tree priority is set to 32.768, which if you've worked with other vendors, a lot of vendors will set to 32.768, but you need to go in and manually change those. MSTP global, and then here's our instances here. And then we can set our port configuration for spanning tree as well. Here's that ether ring that a lot of the industrial switches talk about. I might try to string these 3 switches that I've got together and see if we can make that work. I think that would be an interesting video. If you're interested in that, let me know down below. Here is the CFM setup. Right now it is disabled. Let's see. And then here is the ERPS information. And we don't have any of that configured yet. If that's something you'd like to see, let me know. Under Diagnostics, under System, we've got our system information. So a nice clean sheet, kind of cut sheet here that shows us some of the information we might want to get to about the system, the ports, redundancy protocols. System report, so we can enable the log server, the remote log server here, point it towards that. I'm assuming it's going to want an IP address. And then here are our local logs right here under log query. For port diagnostics, we get an overview of all of the traffic going through the ports. Here would be our error packets here. Here is some diagnostics for our SFP ports if we were using those. And then here is port mirroring, or is currently disabled, but it looks like we can mirror a lot of these ports together, even though, even if they're not right next to each other, I would imagine. So if we do, let's enable this. Let's do G02, and then we'll do it with G06. And we would want receive and transmit. So it looks like we can do that without a problem. I'm not going to save that because I'll forget that I did that, and then as I'm messing with this switch, I'll wonder what the heck's going on. Here we've got LLDP, and then we can assign it and make sure that it's enabled on the interface. And then it does topology discovery, so you're going to be able to see those neighbors. We're going to open the LLD protocol. We're going to set that, and we'll see if anything's been discovered. Looks like it does LLDP media. So it doesn't. This switch doesn't have PoE, but if you had phones and they were plugged in with a power brick, we could probably get this thing to configure the voice VLAN. Maybe. I'm not going to make any promises on that because I haven't seen anything that specifically said voice. But I'm not seeing any neighbors yet, and that's all right. And then under advanced, we have SFlow, and you can come in here, configure it for which version you're running, and then you can enable it on the ports. And then this would be the SFlow statistics here. It is disabled, so we don't see that. Then under help, we've got an about. And so it shows copyright 2021. So I'm hoping that there's a newer version of the firmware for this switch. So I'll ask InHand down in the description if there's a newer version, and then my InHand contact, if you're watching this, is there a newer version that we can get for this switch? So you saw this switch as I saw this switch, and you saw that I made a mistake and didn't see that the set button was down in the bottom right hand corner. I'm not used to looking in the bottom right hand corner for those things. Maybe on the older Netgear switches, I think it might have been down there. I'm trying to remember, but I don't often look down at that bottom right hand corner, especially when I'm filming. So that was my slip. But you got to see it exactly as I see it. If you've got questions about this switch, let me know. Like I said, I'm going to keep it running back here. You can see the Teltonica's powered on right there too. We'll add that other switch in, the Planet switch that I've got. We'll see if we can get the ring topology going if you all are interested in that. If you've got questions about this switch, let me know down below. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. One more thing that I forgot to add is the MSRP on this switch is $355 US. If you're running these or you're interested or you've got questions or whatever, I want to know all the things, because they reached out. They said we've got an industrial switch and an industrial router. So I do have the industrial 5G router that I'm going to be doing a video on and kind of tinkering with. I've got the Teltonica that we're going to do that with as well. But if you're running InHand, if you know somebody who's running InHand, let me know what your experiences are. If you've got questions about this switch, let me know down in the comments. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, and share. Follow me on Twitter and TikTok. Those links are down below, along with affiliate links, a Patreon link. And if you need IT consulting, if you need somebody to take a look at your network or help you build a new network or deploy voice or wireless or storage or security, all those things, head on over to williehowe.com, fill out the contact form that's right there on the front page, and someone will be in touch with you as soon as possible. Come on over to community.williehowe.com, sign up, and let's talk about this switch and other network related gear, configurations, all the things over at community.williehowe.com. Once again, I'm Willie. I want to thank you for being here, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.